Good evening. I'm Mike Splaine. I'm the managing partner of Recruitment Partners. I'm here with my team tonight to talk about navigating caregiver research opportunities. Recruitment Partners is a small specialized consultancy that works with sponsors of clinical trials, mostly in the Alzheimer's and dementia space, to help match them with volunteers needed to participate in research. Tonight we're going to is common in scientific presentations. I'm going to give you about a 10-second look at our list of clients, disclose our clients, but make sure that I want you to know that none have directed the talk. Jen's got the chat, and the rest of our team are here, so we'll just get going. So, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? I think I'm going to start with a review of what our pictures are when we say research or volunteer for research. What's the pictures that come up in our brain? Because, in fact, our cultural picture when we hear research or volunteer for research is very limited compared to what the possibilities and the opportunities are. And I think that's one of the things we've learned as we've been in the recruitment business is that folks don't know what the full menu is. After we talk about our images of research, I want to just take a minute and make sure that we're grounded in the fact that by law, ethics, and custom, humans who participate in any kind of formal research are protected. Part of the protecting and being a good citizen in volunteering, one of the things that can help you, I think, is understanding at least a little bit about what the steps in the research process are, as well as some of the key words that people are going to throw at you as if you've known them your whole life. So we'll talk about a couple of key vocabulary words. I recently had cardiac adventures, and I've learned a lot about my heart and a lot of big words that I didn't know before. So I think even all of us can learn sometimes with vocabulary issues. Want to talk last about how important human subject research the humans are, where you can sign up, and Jen will talk a little bit about the studies that we're supporting at this time. Questions can go in the chat. We probably will be done in time for people to make their questions more known. So this is what we think when we hear research. Yes, Frankenstein. It's kind of scary. It's kind of ugly. It's obviously something research for this poor gentleman was something that was done to him. This is sometimes some of the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is actually a picture of research, but it really is quite different. Um, so, particularly in dementia, there are lots of different ways that science is fighting dementia and working to improve the lives of people affected by dementia and their family and professional caregivers. There's lots of different opportunities here. For example, you may have heard or you may know that two of the Alzheimer treatment drugs that are currently on the market are infused. These infusions that seem to take some of the amyloid plaque out of people's brains that have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's had to be tested, and they had to be tested over many years with many people to both understand whether or not they were safe as well as whether they're effective. Medical devices, uh, of all kinds, get tested by a formal scientific process, not just trial and error. We recently met a guy who got his FDA, very interesting man, who's got his Food and Drug Administration approval of a belt for older people who are at risk of falling that upon detecting a fall, like an airbag, blows up and protects them. And they've been studying that and doing clinical trials on that device for 7 years. I mean, you just can't go to market. Science is also fighting. We obviously think when we think biomedical research, we think pills, all kinds of sizes and shapes. And of course, that's an important part of research in the dementia space. But also, we're applying, social scientists and other teams are applying the same techniques that we do for devices, infusions, and pills, those same standards, those some techniques to care and support interventions. Kind of in the absence of a miracle treatment for Alzheimer's disease, we want to be really sure that as we're recommending to caregivers or recommending a course of action for people living with dementia, that in fact it is supported by good scientific inquiry and method. So the same methods that are being used for drugs and devices are now being applied to care and support interventions. And that's a place where, as you could tell from the title of the talk, where volunteers are definitely needed. One other thing that we talk about frequently, and we have a staff of folks we call research navigators. We'll hear more a little bit about that, but we have a opportunity for people that are curious about research to talk to one of our navigators and see whether or not there's a study that fits them. But we frequently, forget that even a survey, if nobody remembers this movie, we're going to get a new slide, Jen. But, Office Space, we had to take the survey. It would be great. But even surveys are a great way, an easy way. We call it a couch potato way of participating in research and contributing. So there's lots of different ways. Educational programming, as I mentioned, is becoming the scientific testing of educational programming for both caregivers and people living with the disease is now entering a high level of actual scientific testing, looking for outcomes, looking for what really works to help people not only with their knowledge, but also how they apply that knowledge in a caregiving situation. Couple of the main studies that we'll talk about at the end of the talk that we're supporting right now are exactly in this wheelhouse. The other thing that's being tested here is, of course, starting with the COVID crisis, we have migrated a lot of this kind of educational programming and caregiver support programming to being delivered just like I'm delivering here now over Zoom. And there's a real question as to whether or not that is an effective way for people to learn both about conditions, but also about what to do about them. So there's lots of, just want to leave you the impression that it isn't all scary Frankenstein. It isn't all medical experimentation, but it's very carefully controlled look at many, many different ways of participating in research. One of our favorite studies, and we'll have a slide about it later, is an absolute couch potato study where the National Parkinson Foundation, in combination with Michael J. Fox, is sending people a smell test for Parkinson's. They need about another 10,000 people to do it, so there's plenty of room to play with that party. So other interventions under study right now include music and music therapy, the role of exercise, art, or crossword puzzles, or other mentally stimulating activity to see whether or not it has a role in either delaying the onset of symptoms or improving our ability to never see dementia. So there's lots of different things going on. So to summarize, research is a menu. It goes everywhere from offline and online supports and educational programs, simple surveys. Many of us, I mentioned my recent cardiac adventures. I left a little vial of blood for the heart team to study. But also we are studying pills, injections, devices, all of this research opportunities are a menu, which makes it kind of, when you respond or you're curious about research, it kind of makes it a little more challenging, which is why we try to provide both personal support through meeting with one of our navigators, as well as put as much information as we think is useful on our website. So it's a menu. Well, we have to talk about following the prime directive. And what's the prime directive in human subject research? It's protecting the humans. There's no doubt that this is one of the areas where folks who might volunteer for research really worry. And there's a lot to, particularly some of these studies that are very of substances, but any research, as I said, any of the research opportunities other than surveys are protected by these rules of the road. For example, people participate in a research study are guaranteed the confidentiality of their records. This is important when we start talking about cognitive testing or we talk about Alzheimer's and dementia issues, because that's private information and it needs to stay private until we are otherwise willing or able to make it available. Research protection is also built on a system of something called informed consent. Steps in a research process. Volunteers are asked to both receive and try to digest information about what it is they're volunteering for, but also give consent. It's interesting that as Alzheimer research has evolved over the years, we're now seeing more two-prong approach to consent, where we're talking about people with dementia who are in the later stages, where there's a surrogate, somebody who stands up for and is legally responsible for medical decisions for the person with dementia. But the researchers have gone so far as to make sure that they've got the assent of people with dementia, even if they're severely impaired. And how do they know? If people don't respond well to participating in research, the people with Alzheimer's let us know. All human subject research is subject to monitoring and oversight by not only the sponsor of the research, but by government agencies and ultimately by the licensing agencies for any of these substances or interventions that may come to market. When we visit research sites, we laugh because there's a room at almost every research site that's called the binder room, or if you're from Boston, it's the binder room. And there's this room full of patient by patient, identified only with a number because we're protecting confidentiality, rows of binders that have the details of the participation of individual subjects. And monitors can come in at any time and say, I want to see the binders for this study, and they have to be able to examine it, see that it's up to date, accurate, and uh, being maintained in a proper way. All studies, as part of informed consent, but as part of the education process of participating in research, give a direct contact that can be reached in case something goes wrong, in case of an adverse effect is what it's called. And these are generally 800 numbers. They're not just an inbox. They're 800 numbers that are staffed 24/7, so that if somebody has something, and where do if you ever watch American drug commercials, you hear that long list at the end of a drug commercial of the things that possibly could be side effects. This is many places, this is where these become known because somebody volunteers for research and something happens, an adverse event happens, it gets documented, it gets the information gets accumulated, and it's all because the volunteers are making direct contact. In drug research, as well as infusions, less so with social and behavioral research, the last human subject protection is that we take a phased approach. You may have read a headline about phase 2 results of, a drug, or phase 3. In the United States and in Europe, which is as well as in Japan, in the Far East. We take a phased approach. We go slow and we go steady. So a phase 1 trial, which is when there is the possible most risk to humans, it's usually like 10 people, might be 20, and we're trying to make sure that we've got a substance that is safe for the human body. Phase 2, we begin to try to figure out a dose and to really start to discern whether or not there's an impact from that substance. And phase 3 are the big, broad trials that you hear about, unfortunately, frequently hear about them failing in Alzheimer's disease. We're getting there, but it's very slow. Phase 3. There's even a phase 4, where after a drug goes to market, there continues to be data collected. And famously, a couple of those phase 4 studies in the United States have had a couple of drugs taken off the market because of the aftermarket information. So human subject protection is the prime directive. Particularly, the harder and more intense types of research get a lot of scrutiny, but people who volunteer are absolutely protected. So I've started to use some of these words without explaining them. Bad education. Oh, well, you're not my master's students today. I should have been kinder. But just a few words that will get thrown at you that you become familiar with if you volunteer or you look into volunteering for research. A clinical trial is a seriously constructed scientific experiment to determine whether or not a substance or an intervention, that's the broad term, so that could mean a social care intervention, is actually achieving certain outcomes. In a randomized clinical trial, people are in two different wings of a study where one may be getting a placebo, one may be getting a sugar pill, and one may be getting an active substance. A variation of that we see in some of these social care intervention studies, such as LST and CAN do. Do you love acronyms? I don't know. I'm not so sure I like LST and CAN do. Every time I hear LST, I think of World War II and landing ship tank. But control or weightless control refers to the fact that while you are waiting for, say, the 6-week education program, that that you are actually in the study, you're waitlisted, but you're also the data gets collected during that time, contributes to knowing what is happening without you participating in the education program. So that's waitlist control. I mentioned the phases, and important to know which phase. Almost no, I'll just say, I was going to say regular people. I was going to say almost no ordinary people participate in phase 1 trials. It's a very specialized, very highly controlled. People go live at a clinical research center for 2 weeks. There are not many of us that can do that. So it's a very specialized type of trial. So most of what we're going to see are 2, 3, and a 4, of course, is aftermarket. Every study has inclusion and exclusion criteria. Even that Parkinson's smell test, you have to answer 2 or 3 questions to see whether or not you're eligible, whether or not you're right for the study. Uh, I think for the Parkinson's test, Jen, if I'm not mistaken, it's age, might be one of them. What are the
Correct.
other 2
You
criteria?
you cannot have a diagnosis of Parkinson's,
So that
and
would
that's
be an
all.
exclusion.
Yep. That's all that I remember, to be honest.
So simple inclusion,
Yeah.
exclusion criteria. Who gets to be part of the party, who doesn't? The good news about this, when we work with a menu of studies, that if you don't qualify for one study, you may very well qualify for another. Screening refers to the process by which, through survey and personal interview, the study coordinator, the staff person of the investigator that works most directly with volunteers. Screening refers to the run up to informed consent to make sure that we've got as close as possible to the kind of people for the research that we want. And again, this applies to all research. I've talked about informed consent. One other thing that's come up with the studies right now is that in addition to screening, there are more and more studies in the social care and the educational programming realm that are doing a baseline interview to try to ascertain, uh, really be able to refine what did people know coming in? What was their knowledge level of, say, Alzheimer's disease or caregiving? What was their knowledge level before a 6 week or an 8 week educational course? Baseline interviews that's your baseline. It's where you started from. And it's becoming a more common technique. So we thought we should add that to our vocabulary list. This is all, I mean, this is it's complex stuff, but again, it's complex for our protection and so that we can get valid scientific results. Jenna, we got anything in the chat question wise?
No, a couple that came direct to me that I answered, so
Okay.
we are good to keep rolling.
Well, recruitment partners wouldn't exist if we had all the volunteers in the world, for participating in Alzheimer's and related disorder studies. At any given time, and even with some of the changes in federal research funding, I suspect this might be a little smaller number, but at any given time, probably between 60 and 70,000 participants are needed for Alzheimer's disease studies in the United States. And you would think with 7 million people living with Alzheimer's disease in the United States that this would be easy, but it's not. Representation is especially needed from communities of color and men. Oh my gosh. We get asked all the time to find male caregivers. And one of the tricks there, we could tell this story. One of the tricks there is that we find that men do all the work of being caregivers, but they don't use the word. And so they don't identify. We say, oh, would you like to be part of a caregiver study? Would you like to be part of a 6 week educational program for learning about how to be a better caregiver? They don't use the word. And so you confront them and you say, look, I know you're a caregiver. You get grandma to church, you pick up her groceries, she gets to all her doctor's appointments, you're over there 3 days a week, you call her when you're not there, you're a caregiver. And it's like, no, it's my grandma. So important to know that sometimes the words put people off, but all types of relationships. And I don't know where that came from, but I was in North Carolina yesterday. We'll blame them. So people in all kinds of relationships, urban and rural, and various education and income levels. Because again, when we do a study, we want to make sure that whatever it is that we're testing works for everybody. Works for everybody. This is the rationale to trying to diversify as well as improve the quantity of people participating in ADRD studies. But without volunteers, it doesn't work. And I would probably editorialize that one of the factors in why Alzheimer research hasn't moved as fast as any of us would have hoped. Parenthetically, let me tell you, I've been working with people with Alzheimer's and their families since 1986. That's a long time to be hoping. And I think part of the reason has been that uh, not only is Alzheimer research or referral to research not a standard of care yet, other than maybe in neurology practices and research centers, but I think it's also that we just don't have enough volunteers fast enough. We don't want to steer you wrong, even with navigators. We want to be honest and say that um, volunteering, as in any volunteering, you got a job description, you've got a informed consent. You kind of know a lot about what you're getting into, but let's peel back the curtain a little bit more about some of the potential challenges that volunteers face when they volunteer for a research study. Um, we are finding that uh, when a volunteer is full of zeal and excitement about participating in a research study, that a 2 to 3 week lag between you volunteering or you filling out a screening questionnaire and the study team circling back to you to set up an appointment for a baseline interview or to help you understand going the next step. A 2 to 3 week lag from study coordinators right now is not uncommon. And that can be really frustrating because we're ready to go and we're not matching speeds with the study team. So study team response time can be a challenge unless, and thanks for coming tonight, unless you have the understanding that it might be that way. Now, a number of studies will call you the next day after you do an online screening, but some studies, for a variety of reasons, response times are slower. Primary care physicians, Alzheimer referral to research is not, unlike in cancer, a referral to research is not a standard of care when somebody is diagnosed with Alzheimer's or a related dementia. I think also primary care physicians sometimes have to provide records. And last, there's skepticism. I've heard more than once, I've heard primary care physicians discourage persons with dementia and families from participating in research because nothing's worked yet. Why do you think you're going to find the right thing? So these time constraints to fill out records, the attitudes about dementia research and research in general, some of it's very thoughtful. You know, you're a caregiver, you're busy. Do you really have time to participate in a study? I mean, I think some of that, but let me be an adult would be my answer, and let me make my own decisions. You don't have to protect me. The study will protect me. uh, Transportation is less and less of a challenge, but I can tell you that there's no study that we've worked on in the last 3 years where if it was known that transportation was a challenge, that need did not get met by the sponsor. There's no study where we've not been able to work out something workable about transportation, including going to and from Yale University in a limo. Yeah, we supported a study at Yale, 3 years ago, we supported a study at Yale. And I don't know if any of you are from Connecticut or have ever been to downtown New Haven, but the whole campus and the whole downtown was completely torn up. You couldn't find a parking space to save your life. And we said to the sponsor, you just got to move people in and out by scheduled limo. And it's exactly what they did. We do a lot of work in the world of supporting people who live alone with dementia, which is estimated to be at least 1 in 5. That's really something. And this in the need for a study buddy, somebody that you actually live with to do some of the record keeping, to be accountable for substances that may be tested, to help people keep on schedule with a online interview or other appointments in the Zoom world. A lot of studies build in the need for a study buddy that has to live in with you, and that's a potential challenge. We have long distance caregivers as well as when we have people who live alone. This move to try to test everything on Zoom or other platforms has led to a challenge. But you're on Zoom today, so you presumably have met this challenge and wrestled it to a tie. But internet and device accessibility is important. Um, in about 2 weeks, we'll publish a directory on the Recruitment Partners webpage. We now have a directory of where people can find older people can find free or low cost internet access, both at the national and on a market basis, because we recognize that it's a cost that people may not be able to meet. Studies have strict inclusion criteria, and this is a potential challenge. Any other challenges that maybe, maybe you've tried to participate in research and you've hit a roadblock? Throw them in the chat. What do we got in the chat, Jen?
Nothing yet. Some people have said that, this has been really great information so far. So I think
Mm,
we're doing a good job, providing some knowledge that people didn't know before. So this is great.
you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
This is Ireland, or it's at least a quarter of Ireland. I've got Irish ancestry, and actually I have dual citizenship, so it's a dear picture to me. My Irish grandfather used to say when a new couple set up, they'd break the land into an even smaller space so they had their own plot. And they'd have to clear the field so that they could plant. And the village, or at least the large families or many families, would get together to clear a lot. And it was everything from 3-year-olds to 80-year-olds. Not that there weren't a lot of 80-year-olds, but it was the whole community would turn up, and everybody would pick up a rock and move it that was a size they could do. So the small children would pick up stones, the older men would, the manly men would pick up big rocks. That's how you get the walls. By the way, if rocks were money, the Irish would be the richest people on earth, I swear. But we're not, at least not in money. So you could just see these endless small fields that were created because everybody picked up a rock they can. And I guess that exemplifies some of our philosophy, which is uh, not unlike Kevin Kline in a wonderful movie, always saying there's a job for everyone. I think we try to match people up to a study that meets their interests, their needs, their geography. Hopefully, something that everybody can make a contribution in some way or another to research. So, what can you do now? Well, Jen.
Mike, you normally talk about registries and
Oh,
different,
well,
so
okay.
you
So,
run that,
okay, sorry. Some things you
and
can
then
do now
yeah.
include signing up for a registry of clinical trials. The Alzheimer's Association, by the way, they were on my disclosure slide, so I could talk about them. The Alzheimer's Association runs something called Trial Match, which is an opportunity to put in your zip code and what you're interested in and get a feedback in terms of what research studies might be available. It's strongly limited to biomedical research. There's much less social care. The National Institute of Health, through the National Institute on Aging, is a large funder of all kinds of dementia research. It's their mandate under federal law, and they have a matching service as well as a registry service where you can find places where you can put your basic registries where you can put some of your basic biographical information as a way of being connected to or contacted by studies. And Alls Now is another example of a registry. It's run by a great group of people out of Arizona called the Banner Institute. And a lot of what they do is very prevention oriented. So if you're really interested in studies that are working at prevention of dementia in late life, there they are. Couple other databases mentioned here, clinicaltrials.gov is the official repository, and it's still staffed. Don't worry that what's going on in Washington is hurting this. It's still staffed. Clinicaltrials.gov is a searchable database where you can find out whether or not somebody that's trying to get you to participate in some kind of a clinical trial is legit. And in fact, one of our first steps when we get asked to take on somebody as a client, Jen and the team go into clinicaltrials.gov to see whether or not it is real or bogus, because I hate to say it, but fraud is everywhere. And fraud is everywhere where people feel hopeless. And I think some of us do feel hopeless in the face of dementia challenges. So get on a list is something that you can do. Jen, we're posting these slides or
We're
on the,
gonna,
sorry?
yeah, yep, we're going to also be sending out a recording. I
So
think we'll be able
people,
to
so you
bring it
don't have to
home.
write everything down quickly.
Yep, yeah.
Um, you know, I mentioned the smell test. It's a simple scratch and sniff test with informed consent that you could participate in, but it's attempting to find out whether smell list is a risk factor for Parkinson's disease. So the Michael J. Fox Foundation is teamed up with a team in Indiana. The website is mysmelltest.org. As I mentioned, there are about 10,000 volunteers still needed. The inclusion criteria is alive and well over the age of 60 without Parkinson's disease to take a smell test. The
40,
Sorry,
old age of
40.
40,
It's now
40,
30. All right,
well,
we need to
well,
update
40,
our slide.
40.
30 and older. So you have to be a certain age, you have to have a pulse, and you have to be willing to sit at your on your living room couch and do about a 15-minute fun smell test. That's not a lot. The exclusion criteria are very simple. You can't be somebody that has active Parkinson's disease. So the smell test, it's a challenge. It's not quite the ice bucket challenge of a few years ago with the ALS people, but it's getting some momentum. But again, it's a simple step. Look at lists, take the smell test, put your little toe in the water, and participate in research. Jen's going to talk about the two caregiver studies that were online caregiver courses that we're recruiting for right now.
Yep. So Can Do is a fantastic program that is being run by Emory University. As Mike said, it is all online. Can Do is a an educational program that provides education about those higher level organizational type skills that you may need when you're caring for someone, you're supporting someone with dementia. And that includes navigating their healthcare journey, uh, how to deal with the legal implications, things like power of attorney, how to handle their finances. A lot of people are worried about a great example is when you're coming up on a transition of someone living at home to living in a care facility. And how are we going to finance that? How are we going to work through Medicaid? Those are all topics that are covered in the Can Do program. One thing that is really great about the Can Do program when we talk about inclusion exclusion criteria is that you only have to be providing 4 hours a week of support for that person with dementia. And that person with dementia does not have to have a specific diagnosis. There's no need for a confirmation that they have Alzheimer's or they have vascular dementia. It is just a record of memory change. What I love is I mentioned that 4 hour requirement that opens this up to people who may not be living with the person with dementia. It is very helpful when you have someone with memory changes that are very early on in their journey. They are still living independently. This is a great program for that network around that person to get educated before that changes start to get a little further down the
So
line.
we're applying the same level of scientific inquiry to demonstrate this can-do online caregiver course effectiveness as we would as if it was a pill. I mean, that's really the level. And of course, the researchers that are involved in this, Carolyn Clevenger and Dr. Ken Hepburn, are reputable. They've been around a long time in this field, and they're really anxious about the opportunity to take their knowledge, their wisdom about caregiving to that ultimate test. You see here on your screen, you see a contact information, you see who's running the study, you see Emory and the Woodruff School of Nursing, and then you have a link as well as a scan code. That gets you connected to the screen. So that's that first step in the process But this is also a descriptor of the CAN-DO study, and they're enrolling now. I think they'll be enrolling at least through the end of the year. It's a 6-week course, and I think it would be one to take a really good look at if you were in that formal or informal caregiving role. It's particularly true that uh, when you're a caregiver, this stuff comes at you fast and furious, and there's very little that prepares us in our younger life to be the caregiver of a person that we care about with dementia. To just even having kids doesn't prepare you for dealing with your moms, your aunts, your spouses who may be facing dementia. It's an interesting study to me too, because it meets a real need in the caregiver world. What about LST?
All right, I'll hit that slide and we'll go to LST. So LST stands for Learning Skills Together. This is Case Western University. There's a great team over there. I love their team. Learning Skills Together is a little bit more hands-on type skills. So while Can-Do is more organizational skills, LST is things like learning about how someone is going to physically change along the process, how you're going to support them, as their mobility degrades, how to identify fall risk, as their ability to use the bathroom changes, how to handle that, showering, hip on as agitation happens. We all know that that is a part of dementia and it is um, often difficult to deal with. So, what are some coping skills for you as the care partner? And also, the one thing that I really like about this program that a lot of the participants have said they appreciated was a module on hospice and palliative care because oftentimes we as caregivers don't want to think about that. We don't want to think about the end part of the journey, but by getting prepared early on, it is really helpful. Everybody that's participated has enjoyed that part. Uh, Inclusion and exclusion criteria. Participate in LST, you do have to provide in-person support to the person with dementia because again, these are those more personal skills. You do not have to live with that person, but oftentimes the people that participate do live with them. Again, you have to have ability to get online. This is an online study. And Zoom is a part of learning skills together. There is a little bit of group work, while Can Do is pretty much all move at your own pace. So,
So
and again,
slightly different study, slightly different criteria, definitely some different aims. This is about, as it says, learning skills, and it probably focused on a different set of skills than the Can-Do.
Yep. It's worth noting that both of these programs are funded by the National Institute on Aging. There is, of course, no cost to participate. There is a little bit of compensation at the end. I think it's like a Amazon gift card or a American Express card. It's not going to, buy you a cruise to the Caribbean, but it is a nice thank you for your time.
But
And
they do, right, and they don't need transportation, so that's
yeah,
not going to be something that needs to get provided.
yeah.
Um, so so I've mentioned this word navigator a couple of times. Um, one of our innovations is that we have a team, as I mentioned, of aging research navigators. Uh, Tamara, you going to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I can introduce myself. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very glad to see so many people interested in helping us improve research. I'm one of the research navigators, and you guys are more than welcome to schedule 15-minute or more time a Zoom call. You will just sign up using the link, and I have various times available. Or if one of those times doesn't work, then you're free to email me and we'll find the time. And if you want to find if you are eligible, if you're interested, and if you would like to learn more about current researches that we may have, this is the time that you will use to ask me some questions. I'll provide you more information. I'll take information from you about yourself. And after that, this is kind of like the first screening. And after that, I'll connect you with the research coordinator for whatever research you may be interested. Let it be, for example, can do. So you guys are welcome to use the link and schedule a 15-minute call with me anytime.
It's a little quirky if you notice there that her languages are Georgian, Russian, and English, but Tamari is a graduate student at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and works for us part-time, but she really has those languages, which I think is worth
Yes.
knowing. Someday, we haven't had a lot of Russian volunteers yet, Tamari. I'm still working on that. But she's actually from the Republic of Georgia, and we're delighted to have her on our team. So if you want to know what study is right for you, or you want more direction about participating in research, you can use our link and make an appointment with one of our navigators, not just Tamari. So there you are, recruitment partners. We're trying to connect researchers and participants. Um, we enjoy the work. Uh, the world has gotten a little tighter, particularly for government-funded research recently, but I think it will be bouncing back, and we're predicting that studies, particularly in the second and third quarter, or the third and fourth quarter of this year, are going to be just ramping up, trying to find additional volunteers as some of the federal cuts or threats of cuts start to subside. So, um, don't let that discourage you from inquiring. Jen, what's in the chat?
Well, so far we have no questions, but if anyone has something that you'd like to drop in, please do. I did have one question that came in through email prior to the meeting, and that's concerning what happens if I can no longer participate. So I thought, Mike, it'd be nice for you to talk about the perspective of participants if they can no longer participate, and also what happens on the researcher side if you have a participant that can no longer participate.
So if it, and I was going to say it depends on what kind of study you're in, but you get closed out in a thoughtful and ethical manner, even if you just drop off the face of the earth, because say you're in one of these caregiver studies and your person with dementia goes to the hospital. If you've been through it, you know, as I know, that a hospitalization of a person with Alzheimer's disease is rough on everybody. And you just have to drop something. Somebody may be going to rehab. They may be medically compromised, not just compromised in their thinking. So imagine you're in a caregiver study and the roof caves in. Study Studies are obligated to reach out to you through whatever mechanism you've given them to be in touch. Email, Facebook contact, mail, yes, the US mail, as well as phone. So you have to be closed out and your what happened to you accounted for in a proper manner. In a drug trial, there are a couple of things about closing out. One is the returns. There's a good, solid, uh, coordinated effort to close you out, because study drugs, whether they're the placebo or the active drug, really should be returned. They have to be returned so that in a drug study or a device study, the sponsors of those trials really want to get that uh, experimental drug or that experimental device back into their hands. So they'll make an extra effort because they have that obligation to try to not let that stuff be out there on the market untested. Further steps to close out would include making sure and keeping you in a database. This is in drug trials and device trials, keeping you in a database for at least another 6 months and doing some check-ins to make sure that you have no lingering or possible side effects if you add the active treatment drug. The last thing that happens in drug trials, boy, it's highly complex, but it is sometimes happens, and this actually makes headlines, that a drug in a phase 3 trial is so effective with so few side effects that it's immoral, it's unethical to keep that from the people in the trial who are getting the placebo, getting the sugar pill. And so you will see, occasionally you'll see a headline about a study that stopped because they gave everybody the active drug and because it was so effective. I think you're going to hear this summer about a study that's called Finger. In the rest of the world, it's called Pointer in the United States. That's actually a study of lifestyle changes that affect your risk of dementia in later life. And that's an example of a study where you're going to hear about halfway through the study what the package of lifestyle interventions were so effective, they gave them to everybody. That's just tease some news you'll hear about in July and early August. How's that?
No, it's great.
You have to be dealt with ethically, responsibly. There's a legal and a moral responsibility. You just can't be kicked to the curb. It's part of the protections.
Perfect. Well, I don't see any other questions, but
Okay.
we do have another moment if anyone wants to throw anything in there. Otherwise, we appreciate you coming.
Happy day after National Clinical Trials Day. We were
Yes,
unable to schedule this yesterday, but there's an annual National Clinical Trials Day that we put this together in celebration of. So thank you for your time. Catherine and Tamari, thank you for joining
Hmm.
in.
Oh, we have one more question.
Oh, good.
It's are you also handling recruitment related to patient and public involvement for the dementia research? Or do you have any plan or discussion about PPI?
We don't have any recruitment partners doesn't have any work in that space right now. But we are all about the voice of the patient. We're voice of the person living the lived experience of dementia. An example is yesterday we did a summit on people living alone with dementia, and one of the principal speakers was a man who's 80 years old who's living alone with dementia. I mean, that's how we roll. So we really believe in that. There are increasingly in the United States, there is an openness to hearing the desires of the person affected by the condition in shaping research. It's not universal. It's a rare group of researchers that are open to that kind of contact. And if I can point you, if you're interested in that kind of participation, send me an email or use the navigator box and I'll be glad to connect you. But we absolutely believe in it. It's just not becoming prevalent. It is interestingly, there are some models of patient engagement in designing research, direct engagement in designing research in Japan that are quite interesting and quite profound. Researchers, I think, need to know what's the goal? What is it that people living with dementia want? Because a few points on your mini mental is maybe not what people want. It may be what people want is to be able to actively engage in their grandchildren's life. You may want to, I hear a lot from people living with dementia, they want to drive again. So goals of the person affected by the condition and not othering them, not objectifying them is becoming a little part of Alzheimer research, but it's not mainstream yet in the States.
well, I think that's about time for us. Thank you everyone for joining. Please be on the lookout in your emails for a recording so that you can rewatch if there's something that you missed. You can feel free to share it with anyone that you know that may be part of a support network for someone with dementia. And also, you will be getting a email from Tamari. She's going to be sending out her Calendly link so that if you do have some further questions after you've thought about today's presentation and you'd like to chat before you reach out to participate in any of the studies, we can do that. And also, oh, one last thing, I wanted to pop into chat the direct link for the research that we displayed on the screen. So if you are extremely motivated to participate and you don't have any questions, you're ready to roll, you can click on any of these links to go to the smell test, to go to the Can Do or the LSP. Oh, we think this last link did not populate correctly. You may have to copy and paste. You won't be able to click that LSP link. But if you hit those links, they will take you directly to the questionnaires set up by the institutions that are doing the research. But again, if you have some questions and you'd like to chat with Tamari, that can be your first step. And then Tamari can transfer your information over to the study coordinators.
Well, we asked for an hour of your time. It's 7:59. So I think we accomplished that. Thank you for your time and please be in touch.
Thank you all.
Thank you.